Going into round 8 of the European Team Championship, Russia held a 3-point lead over their rivals, but they had a tough pairing in Armenia, and the match didn't go too smoothly. There were 2 draws. Grishuk lost, but this victory by Jan Nepomniachtchi pulled them out of trouble. So Nepomniachtchi against Movsesian, and I think this endgame is a good illustration of good technique. White is a pawn up here, but well, there are a few technical problems. This pin is a little bit annoying. This bishop looks through the rook at the pawn. Anyway, let's see how Nepomniachtchi steered the game to victory. He played rook d7, and this simplifies the position. If rook takes pawn, as a nice tactic, suddenly white manages to pin the pinner, wins material. So in this position, black had to exchange rooks. That needs to be stopped. Now rook d1, threatening of course to get a queen, so rook d4 forced. Now here, again, this is a nice technique from white. One could exchange on d4, then play g3 and take the pawn at h5. Now, it could well be this is winning, but if you compare this with the game, this is harder because white can't create a passed pawn on the queen side. But let's see what happened in the game. First of all, g3, that saves the g-pawn. King takes pawn, and now, again, doesn't exchange rooks, but c3 forces the exchange of rooks. But you can see that in this case, so white is still a pawn up, past g-pawn, but he also has a passed c-pawn, and that is just too much for black to bear. And white's victory was actually very, very smooth. Now, before advancing any pawns, white makes sure he brings his king up the board nice and steadily, and makes sure that black's king isn't entering white's position via these squares. So that was a nice retreat from the bishop. And now the king steadily advances, and only now, when all the conditions are right, is it time to push the pawns. And actually, now it's incredibly simple. So that forces the bishop out the way. Of course, the king pawn endgame would be an easy win. And now we distract black's king using the c-pawn. Okay, now the kingside pawn advances. I mean, this is a hopelessly lost position, but it's, I think, when you see good technique, you realize how simple it can make a victory. But you have to do a bit of calculation, and you also have to understand which positions are simple. So now the king goes in, and it's very easy to win this one. So black resigned here. If the bishop goes back, bishop f7, and now the king comes round to h6, and the pawn is going to go through. So that match ended 2-2, which meant that Russia's rivals had a chance to catch up a little bit, and Hungary took advantage of that by defeating Azerbaijan by 3.5, a really crushing victory. And there are 2 players in the Hungarian team that have been playing incredibly well over this tournament. There's Zoltán Almasi, a very experienced player, who has 5 out of 7, excellent score, and Richard Rapport, who's played every single round and has 6 out of 8, and this was his victory over Timur Rejkjavik. So in this position, material is level. Rapport has the white pieces. Material level. Aren't that many pawns on the board, but it's fantastic to see how Rapport exploited the poor positioning of this bishop. Now this bishop is well defended by that pawn, locked in, but unfortunately it can't come back to this side of the board. It really needs to be on this diagonal, blocking out the bishop on a1. Well, anyway, let's see how Rapport exploited that. First of all, he played queen a2. So there's a pin there. So the bishop came back, and now the rook came to d1. So the rook is activating. So obviously that can't be taken because of the back rank checkmate. h6, so creating an escape square, or Luftloch, as we say in West London. And bishop c6, so nice battery here. So that queen is tied to the defence of the g-pawn, and now the queen slides in. So white is making good ground here. And here's a nice tactic. If rook e8, then you don't need to move the queen. You can play rook d6, and this is a winning move. If rook takes queen, then rook takes wins. Of course, that can't be taken. And when the rook moves, then g7 caves in, and don't forget the bishop as well. And if queen h7, then rook takes wins, because if rook takes queen, rook c8 is mate. So king h7, and now Rapport increased the pressure by advancing his h-pawn. I love the h-pawn attack, so strong. So the threat is h5, and well, black's queen is running dangerously short of squares. But also, by advancing the h-pawn, you give the king an escape square in case you need to bring the rook up the board. Nice move. f6, the queen slid in. Black is lost here. Seventh rank is weak. This diagonal has opened, and Rapport cruises in. If bishop a4, then bishop f7 actually traps the queen. It's in a sorry state. There's no squares. So the bishop had to go back to e8, and now bishop e6 threatens bishop f5, winning the queen. The king came back, and queen b7. This is a nice little shuffle that wins the game. So first of all, Rapport forces black's rook to leave the 8th rank, and we'll see that's important. And after queen e7, Rejkjavik actually resigned here. There's no defence. So the threat is queen f8, followed by queen g8 mate. And if queen h5, making a bit of room for the king, then queen f8 check. The king comes up, bishop g8, and now we can see why Rapport wanted to force the rook up the board, because queen takes bishop is checkmate. Really nice finish. So that means going to the final round, Russia have 14 points, Hungary have 12 points, and they face each other in the final round. So if Hungary beat Russia, they would tie. Now, Russia have a very good tiebreak score, but Hungary, well, it would be some kind of moral victory at the very least if they could defeat Russia, so that's going to be interesting. Let me just show you one final game from round 8. This is between Anish Giri and Alexei Shirov from the Netherlands-Latvia match. Giri has a slight advantage here. I mean, these pawns aren't beautiful, although it's hard to attack them. But he has a space advantage with this pawn on e5, and he used that to start an attack, or a little bit of initiative on the king side with h4. There we go. Once again, we see this h-pawn attack that I really like. And black always has a dilemma in these situations. Do you leave the h-pawn to roll forward? Do you block it with h5? Do you block it with h6? You know, each of these moves involves a compromise. Shirov decided just to ignore it and double rooks on the d-file, looking to perhaps exchange rooks or get some counterplay. Giri exchanged. Now, what's he gained by doing this? Well, he's hoping to use the h-file. So g3 allows the king up the board, nudges up the board, and the rook might be able to shuffle across to get some attack. So first of all, Giri pushes the queen back. Well, he was expecting queen b4 here, and then rook h1, and then knight g5, and white definitely has some initiative here. You know, maybe the queen could come across, maybe rook f3. Not so simple for black. And that's why Shirov wanted to play rook d3 to exchange some pieces, but this was a terrible blunder. After rook d1, Shirov had to resign. It's a beautiful kind of crossfire attack. So if rook takes rook, rook takes queen obviously wins. And if rook takes rook here, then you play rook takes rook check. And only then queen takes, and white is a whole rook up. Very unfortunate for Alexei. So do join me for my report after the final round 9. That should be either later on today or tomorrow. It's just been a fascinating tournament, but Hungary-Russia is the big pairing. Watch out for that.